Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Drew Jimbo Neutron podcast. This very special guest today, very talented local musician and very iconic, kind of in this local scene, Mr. Damon Fowler. Very appreciative of you taking the time to come out here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Um, so kind of cut to the chase a little bit. You all have a great love of music. You've been playing since you were 12 years old, doing different gigs. What's it like being a 12-year-old doing gigs and you
It
know
do- well at 12, I started playing when I was 10, and my cousin started playing as well. He was like 9, and maybe I don't know. And we started playing with my uncle. My uncle was in a country band, and they would play all over East Tampa, and this was in like the late 80s, early 90s. So back then there was a country bar circuit. There was like a handful of country bars. All these bands played, and the people went to them, and that was their scene. And it was really cool little scene. And um so my cousin and I would go and sit in. His dad was the rhythm guitar player, and he sang in the band. And so as children, a lot of times we wouldn't go on Friday and Saturday nights to the liquor lounge, man. Uh, back in those days, there would be a lot of like Sunday evening picnics and, stuff like that. So we'd go sit in and play with the bands a little bit. And every once in a while, our parents, would find a night, like a jam night or a special thing. And, we'd probably play inside the bar or something, but it wasn't like Saturday night.
right.
And so we do that. And then also on Sundays, a lot of times my family, I lived at my grandparents' house. My family would have these Sunday barbecues, and like everybody in my family just strummed a little bit of acoustic guitar and stuff. Like some people get together and watch football. My family did that, you know. And so by the time I was 12 and 13, we were starting to go sit in with the band a little more, go play a little bit more. And when I was 14, I entered into this guitar contest, and it was called the Best of the Bay, and it was held at the Kapok Tree Pavilion in Clearwater. Back then, it was Thoroughbred Music, and so it excited me so much. At that point in my life, I mean, I have asthma, and I was an only child, and not very athletic, you know, and so I really found something that I felt like I was kind of good at, so it really inspired me to play harder and learn and try and work on it and stuff. And so, I mean, your question was, how was it at 12 years old? It was pretty awesome at 12, it felt awesome.
I mean, I think it's just a great move in terms of publicity because no one's gonna write a bad review or boo a 12-year-old, even if he's
Hey, I've been booed at 12. Man, the gig that changed my life, man, really, I was probably like 18 or 19, maybe 20. Um, and Jeff Beck and Johnny Lang were on tour, and Johnny Lang got pink eye basically. And man, I was going to the concert to see Jeff Beck and Johnny Lang anyway. And my friend that owned Skipper's Smokehouse, a guy named Tom White, uh, called me and said, "Hey, he had a talent agency also at the club, and so he called me and said, "Hey, man, they just called me looking for somebody that could fill in for Johnny Lang. What are you doing tonight?" And I'm like, "Oh man, I'm going to the show anyway." you know. And so I did that, and when we first walked out on stage, and they were like, "Ladies and gentlemen, Johnny Lang's sick. He's not going to be here. Give it up for this dude," basically. And people were started booing. And it was like we were like, "Oh no." Look at all these people booing. But then we played, and by the end we got a standing ovation. And after that, man, my gigs, more people would come to see me, and that gig changed my life.
And was that at what age was that?
I think I was like 18,
Okay.
19, something like that. Um, And so we started playing Skippers more and selling tickets there, and we're able, I've always played in Sarasota quite a bit, and like the west coast of Florida. We play quite a bit on the east coast of Florida and the Keys and stuff like that. And so yeah, so around then was when I really kind of started rolling.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because out of all the gigs that change your life, because there's just so much like music and stuff in the area, you would think it would just kind of be like a grassroots, because usually you only hear about your kind of
Well,
stuff with the fairy tales,
it
like.
was. It was. It was grassroots, and I was already selling. I already had a CD out, and I was already selling T-shirts and stuff, and I had a band, and we were working, and I had a bunch of club gigs. But after the Jeff Beck thing, man, it just really expedited it for us a little bit.
Was the album you had out at the time, was that Riverview? Was that your first
That was
one?
Riverview Drive.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
What kind of is, I know that you've done, is it 8 or is this your 9th? Uh
Um, I think it's my ninth if you count all with Southern Hospitality and the live
mhm.
record I put out.
So,
Yeah, it's ninth.
and a lot of those, you did, some of those were self released, and then I know you did a few on a record label, the Blind Pig.
Yeah.
What is kind of the ex- different experiences in terms of producing and trying to release an album while on a label and doing a self release?
It's always a different experience every time. Um, it just depends on. There's so many variables. It's hard to even really explain. Blind Pig was really good to me. They gave me an opportunity when I did not have an opportunity, and they were very supportive of me. I put out 4 records with them, including Southern Hospitality's record, Easy Living. Um, and so, those guys were great. They got older and they just retired, so they sold their catalog to the Orchard. And so now it's Blind Pig is still I think it's still a label, but I don't know if they're signing bands or anything like that. But so that was a great experience. Releasing on my own. There's been some great experiences with releasing records on my own. The best part about releasing on your own is you get to keep all the money, right?
That's,
But also the worst part is you have all the responsibility of everything, And what I found for me that works the best is to try and have a team of people that you don't have to carry the whole thing on your back. You have publicity people that'll help you, and you have the label. Right now the deal I have is with a label called Landslide.
mhm.
They're out of Fernandina Beach, Florida, and man, this is the best experience I've had so far. It's been great. They've been really awesome. Very patient, very interested in us. You know, they spelled everything right on the posters, and it's like they've been great.
uh, it seems to really show, because it's a Alafia Moon. It's a really good album. While I was doing research and stuff, I finally got the opportunity. Well, and my dad was telling me about it as well. I finally got the opportunity to listen all the way through. It's really good, and I really liked. My favorite song was "Leave It Alone." I know it's a little cliche to always the first one on the soundtrack, but I mean it really sets the tone for that, and I really like that song a lot. It
Thanks,
just
man. They're talking about having a team and stuff. We have a radio person that we've been working with, and her name's Michelle Castilia, and man, she has been doing a fantastic job. And they've been sending out the CD to all, like, man, this week we were #1 on the Roots Music Blues Rock charts, right? So we were the most played. We have like 6 songs in the top 50 right now. And this is what's playing all over, and as far as like independent radio, uh, whatever, internet radio, stuff like that. And Leave It Alone that's the most played.
it's it's because it's really good. But one thing I really liked too was you did the cover of Guitar, or the
Yeah,
guitar. I thought that was a really good addition too, and I believe it's the only cover on the entire
it is.
album as well. What is it? Just a song you really liked? Is that kind of
Well,
why?
I was telling somebody the other day, man, all my albums, I like covers,
Hmm.
I don't want to go to, I'm not like big into like, going to hear somebody play Brown Eyed Girl for the 10 millionth time, but it's a great song. So if they do it good, that's totally cool. But um, I think it's an interesting vision into someone's record collection. Like I like, you know what I mean? I look at musicians and I like to wonder what they're like, what's in their record collection? Like, what do you listen to? Like, you know, and I think it's just a good little glimpse into kind of what you're listening to. And it's fun. I don't know. There's something about a cover song to me that and it like a kind of an obscure but still cool song, that it really I think it helps you connect with people and on a couple of levels, you know.
And you're speaking of musicians' record catalog. What are some, obviously some blues and rock and stuff, but who are some guys that you kind of turn to a lot, not even just for
Oh man,
inspiration, but
musically, man, it depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Um, you know, I grew up listening to like the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner and Stevie Ray Vaughan and stuff like that. Also George Jones and Keith Whitley and Vern Gosdin, stuff like that. You know, um, anymore, like I said, depends what kind of mood I'm in. I like reggae a lot. I like I like jazz. I love blues. You know, I really love J.J. Cale. Man, J.J. Cale always touches me. There's something about him, man. I love his lyrics. And I like songwriters. You know, stuff like that. John Prine. Oh, when I was little, my uncle was a big John Prine fan, so I've heard John Prine music my whole life, and I still like it. It's really good.
just great lyricists. I mean, the influence shows up too. I think it's you have a really good dynamic sound, and you it's interesting too because blues rock is kind of, I guess, the best way to describe your genre, but you are able to kind of go back and forth with them as well, like more rock on one, more blues on the other. But it just always sounds really kind of fresh. And is that something you actively look for? Just always be fresh, or is it just kind of?
I like the older I get, the more I just try to sound like me. And then if it's a rocking tune, I play it like a rocking tune. If it's a blues tune, man, I love blues, man. I love acoustic blues, Blind Willie McTell, Curly Weaver kind of stuff. Lightning Hopkins or like the acoustic stuff, and I love his electric stuff. Um, so like I love blues, and then I also like songwriters, and I like southern rock and stuff. Growing up in the era I did, I was born in '79, and I grew up in East Tampa, but hung around Brandon and East Tampa and stuff growing up. There was a huge metal scene, giant, and there's still a metal scene here. All the death metal bands, like I would say like 75% of them were from Brandon or Tampa. They all recorded at Morris Sound out in Temple Terrace. Um, now all those guys tour overseas. You know,
Yeah.
so I grew up watching some of that stuff. And like when I was in eighth grade, man, my favorite band was Guns N' Roses. I like Use Your Illusion too. I listen to that record every morning before school. Um, so I like all that stuff. You know.
it it's really funny that you're talking about how you like different genres and stuff too, because when you talk to a musician, uh, you always assume that they're just going to listen to kind of what they perform, but it turns out to be a musician, you kind of have to be a student of music, kind
Yeah.
of have to have different tastes, and
Yeah.
it's
Well, you're supposed to, and that's what I was saying earlier. When you hear a musician, the musicians that I like are the ones that make me go, I wonder what that guy's listening to.
yeah.
You know, like if I like sometimes I hear guys and I'm like, oh man, I bet that guy's got a really small record collection, you know. Not to be
It's
negative, but
right.
like you can tell, you know.
That's obviously I had that question when I listened to you, but there's a couple bands, I have like that, like Queens of the Stone Age. Like
Yeah,
it's like they have a different sound every album. It's like how
they're
do you
great.
guys? It's like, and you're just running the same people back. Like,
Yeah.
what do you? How is that even possible? But um, you know, you're talking about earlier the efforts that went into the album. You for this new album you did, you had quite a list of people working on it. Is very very impressive and decorated. Is that really just kind of a result of your growing experience in the industry, or?
Well, all those people are my friends. All the people that played on the record are just people I've have personal relationships with that I've either played in other bands with or just good friends with. Um, that was another great thing about working with Landslide. I got to record it locally. You know, I recorded it in Largo with one of my favorite engineers, this guy George Harris. Um, he's a really good with guitar tones, and when you go and hang out, you know, you're not really. It's not like going to the really fancy studio where like they're like, all right, and time starts now. We're billing you. Go. You know, at working with George, we just set aside some time and we would just go hang out and eat like spicy hummus and stuff for a long time and until the mood hit us and then we would record, you know. Um, I probably didn't answer the question, but that's I really enjoy that about that relationship with him. So do back to the question, you know, we got TC Carr on the album. He's a harmonica player.
Mhm.
TC was someone that I would, as a kid growing up, you know, my parents would take me to go see. And when I started, you know, when I was 16, I got a car and I started, you know, going to the open blues jams and sniffing around St. Pete scene, you know, because back then there was Rock Bottom. I don't know if you know who Rock Bottom was, but Rock was he was like the godfather of the blues scene in St. Pete. He's famous in Norway. There's a club there called Rock Bottom. All the promoters there know him. They were famous because they had a band in the early 80s called the Silver King Band. And it was kind of vaudeville. You know, they told tongue in cheek, dirty stories a little bit. And they played, there was a lady that played stand up drums, like a cocktail kit. And her name was Flo Minga. And then the piano player's name was Barry Kuda, who still lives in Key West. You can see him in Key West, Barry Kuda. And then Rock Bottom played harp. And so anyway, the scene, that's kind of how that's where all that stuff came from. It was the early 80s and they would find someone in the audience that looked like Nancy Reagan. And then they would tell dirty jokes to her and like just really, you know, get really crazy with her. And it made world news. So they ended up, you know, Rock became like this, you know, and he'd put in so much time around the Bay Area. He'd played in all these bands. So he became like the celebrity around the Bay Area. And he was very much the godfather of the blues scene, you know. So when I was 16, I would go see guys like Rock Bottom or TC Carr. They're both harp players. And so being at a point I'm at now to actually have TC come and play with me has been really great. I'm grateful for it. You know, he's really awesome and he's a great guy and he's one of the best harp players I've ever heard. Very musical, you know. So really happy to have TC on there. Mike Koch played organ and keys on the album, and he's in the Dickie Betts band. So and I knew Mike before I was in the Dickie Betts band, because I would go to his jams in Sarasota, and I was just part of that scene, you know. And we got Josh Nelms. He's making the bottle noises and all the hooting and hollering on the story. Josh is one of my close friends. He played guitar in the Betty Fox band. Betty sings on the record. Betty's a friend of mine. Um, and so we just kind of, our friends came over and played with us, you know, so it was really easy to do, you know.
Is how, how much of a difference there in terms of being able to schedule it when you're scheduling with friends rather than like, scheduling studio time?
Um, well, basically, it was one of those things, kind of like who's available too.
Right.
We're like, we got, X amount of time marked out. Hey, and then, so once I mark that out, I call them. I'm like, hey, could you make it by on this day or whatever? And we just kind of schedule it like that, like anything.
So working with you're talking about how much you like working with CC Cards, someone you admired. You've gotten to work with quite a few legendary musicians. Just to name a couple: the Buddy Guy, Jeff Beck, Greg Allman, Jimmy Vaughn, Dickie
Yeah.
Betts.
Well, see, the thing is, like the first four you mentioned, those are people I got to open for
Yes.
tour. And I've played with Buddy Guy a few times. Opened for Greg a handful of times when he was alive. Um, you know, we got to, man, I've probably opened for George Thorogood probably 30 times. And we made George is like a personal friend of the band's now. He's unbelievable. Dude's like super rock star guy, and he's been really kind to us. They take us out on these tours, and they help us grow our fan base, and his team and his management stuff. I've really learned a lot from hanging out with those guys. Um, Playing with Dickie was great. Um, how I got that gig, I think, I don't really know, is before that. Years before, I was living in Anna Maria Island, and my wife was pregnant, and I met Barry Oakley Jr. and his wife was pregnant. Barry Oakley Jr., his dad was the original bass player for the Allman Brothers, and so we just made friends. We were just like just beach buddies, kind of, just run into him and be, hey, buddy, how's your wife, all this stuff. And we ended up starting a little side project band called Baby Daddy. And we had a drummer that his wife just gave birth. Barry's wife's about to pop. My wife's like 2 months out, and so Barry, his wife, her water broke at our gig. So fast forward a little bit, and Barry was playing in Butch Trucks. He was putting together a project with Butch Trucks called the Freight Train Band. And they'd gone through a couple of guitar players, and, Butch just wanted something a little different or whatever, And so Barry actually threw my name in the hat. That's how I got the gig with Butch Trucks, man. And that was another gig that kind of changed paths for me. I started touring with Butch. I'd already been touring with my band at Southern Hospitality for years. But it was really nice, Butch rode with me because I don't smoke cigarettes. And so he rode in the front seat with me a lot, man. And he would just tell me all these great stories, man, just all this insight from the Allman Brothers. And he was the only member that never missed a day, and so, man, playing with Butch was incredible. The experience was fantastic. And so I did that for about 2 years, and then Butch passed away. And so I started working on material for another Damon Fowler record. And that's when I got signed to Whiskey Bayou Records, which is Tab Benoit's label. Tab is from Houma, Louisiana. He is this handsome Cajun blues man, blues star, like the guy, everybody loves him, and he's fantastic. And so I started working on that record, and before we release it, Dwayne Betts called me, Dickie's son, and was just like, hey, look, we're going to do this summer tour, and my dad wants you to come play slide guitar. And I was like, oh, for real? Who is this? What is this, man? And so that's what I did. And man, it was like playing Thanksgiving dinner and the Super Bowl every night, man. It was, catered food and tour buses, and man, I got to hang out. Some of my heroes, just meet some incredible people. I got to jam with J-Mo from the Allman Brothers, you know. I met Bonnie Bramlett again. She jammed with us when we were playing in Nashville with Butch, and she came out. And I'm a big Bonnie Bramlett, like Delaney, Bonnie and Friends. I'm a big fan of that. So, so then she came and hung out again when I was with Dickie. Man, she remembered me, and I was like, wow, that's the
Quite
best.
the honor. Yeah.
Like neat. So yeah, man, all that's been great. You know. Then after that, I started considering putting out another Damon Fowler record. You know, the Dickie tour was amazing. So I started working with a manager. My new manager was no longer my new manager. He's just my regular manager.
Earned the title.
Yeah, just now he's just manager. But that's taken a lot of stress off my plate dealing with stuff like the business side of it, because man, it's exponential, dude. It goes and goes and goes, and eventually you don't have any time to write or play or anything like that, you know. So in 2018, I believe, maybe early 2019, I started working with Brett Steele, my manager, and he went out and got me a record deal. I recorded some songs on a cassette 4-track recorder from the like the mid 90s, and man, he brought a few decent deals to the table, you know, more than I knew. And I went with Landslide. I just had a feeling. I liked the albums they've put out. They put out the first couple Derek Trucks records, which I own and I really like. They put out a couple of great Sean Costello records. They put out a bunch of Widespread Panic a long time ago. They put out, and my friend Tinsley Ellis, basically is on the blues rock scene. You know, he's like an elder blues rock guy, and I talked to him, and he told me how cool they were, and you know, to trust them and stuff. So that's where we went, and it just turned out great.
That it's really good to finally you get that comfort level, you know, with that, because a lot of people work a long time and don't necessarily get that, especially in the music industry, you know.
Yeah.
And especially some bands will sign those like long-term contracts when they're just kids, and you hear a lot of horror stories like that.
That happens a lot, man. That happens a lot.
So
I've been lucky in that world, you know.
yeah, it's what would you kind of say your experience was, because you've been in the industry for so long, and since you were a kid, how quickly did your understanding kind of of the industry just expand, kind of because you have to if you're gonna move up? Like how
Man,
hard?
I struggle every day. I just try and pay attention and just try not to get overwhelmed, you know, because it's ever changing. You know, what medium your music is on, where the cool spot is to sell your stuff, how to sell it, who's going to buy it, all that stuff. You know, it, it's really too much, you know. Um, so that's why I'm just thankful for a team, you know. And I just try to, like, when I don't let those things get to me, you know. And talking about the Billboard thing, you know, man, I didn't expect to debut at #1. I really didn't. I thought it and what I've always been told by agents and managers and stuff is that, you know, you want to get your record on the Billboard Blues Charts. That helps them, you know, with talent buyers, and it's just good for your bio and all, whatever, you know,
Marketing.
and marketing and stuff. And so I was like, cool, man. You know, I had one time at debut at like #7, you know. So I was kind of figuring out Alafia Moon, it's probably going to be like 5, you know, like #5. And that's kind of where my heart was set. I was like, man, we get hit #5, man, I'll feel really happy about this. And so when Brett called me and was like, hey, dude, you know, they just sent me an email, said, congratulations, next week you're #1, you know. I was like, what? I don't even know how he did that. I think truly though, with the lockdown and the shutdowns and stuff and the pandemic, and Um, I started immediately doing a live stream,
Yeah.
like the first day, and because I don't know why, I just started doing it.
Fowler's
But
Garage.
Ballard's
Right.
Garage,
Mm-hmm.
and man, we had a ton of views, man, and sponsorships and all kinds of stuff, and it really helped get us through. But I also think that, man, we've actually made fans from doing that. I didn't know what to do, but I'm like, man, I'm really glad I did that. I feel like I run into people all the time that are like, hey, man, I used to watch Fowler's Garage, I'm like, cool, man, you know.
I thought that was a really good idea too, especially at the beginning to kind of hop on that, especially when you're talking about, oh, it's so hard to keep up with where to put stuff. Very savvy thing to do, and then I know you started doing the gig stories and having other musicians and stuff on too, which is
I don't know how well that was received on YouTube and all that stuff, but man, it was really fun doing. And while being locked in and not leaving, because being a musician, there's all sorts of things, right? There's all sorts of hats that you wear. But one of the best parts of this, because it's some of it's a crappy job, man. Some of it you're like in a van for 8 hours. You're getting yelled at by club owners and whatever. It's just some crap comes along with it, just like any job. And I'm not griping. I feel totally blessed to be doing this. But one of the best parts about being a musician is like the relationships you make with people, right? And like the camaraderie, and like you make these friends that go through the same thing as you. And so you just, even if it's different music or you're in like whatever, there's this thing, and I was really missing that. I was really missing just like telling jokes, to my friends, them telling me jokes and, just goofy stories and stuff. There's only so much my wife can listen to until she's like, all right, okay, you know, and so gig stories really was kind of for me. Um, but we've gotten a couple of killer stories out of it too, man. There's a couple of really good singers, man. You know,
it's a lot of fun to watch, and just I think very educational, and which when you get people involved in an industry that not a lot of people know about the ins and outs, and especially with so much travel and things, everyone's got so many stories to tell, whether you've been touring for 20 or 5 years, it's just
yeah.
everyone's got something to offer. I thought that was really good.
I that was something that became apparent to me. I was like, wow, man. There was a few folks that said, sure, I'll do a gig story. That I was like, wow, man. Like Bob Margolin gave me a gig, like gave me 2 gig stories, and he had more. He's like, how many do you want? And and I was like, wow, that's really awesome, man. Bob, I've always looked up to Bob, man. He played guitar for Muddy Waters, and he's, kind of a direct link and that was really cool.
Yeah, it's great. Very really enjoyable, and it's funny too. You mentioned you're surprised people are reaching back out. It's really shocking, just if you keep asking, just the number of people who will like eventually get back with you, and
Yeah.
like it's all it takes is just putting in that step forward. That's all it really is. You never know unless you try.
Right. And some people are just too scared to try.
Yeah, yeah,
It
exactly.
just takes that one push to be like, hey, you mind doing this? And most people are really nice.
Yeah.
Most people are really cool,
It Yeah, exactly. It's like one thing I noticed too. It just seems that everyone, not kind of lately, everyone's like, oh, everyone's at war with each other. I was like, if that's all you're looking for, like I have pleasant conversations every single day with
Right.
people I know nothing about. Like,
Yeah. Well, just stay out of the weird political chat rooms. Everybody's being
yeah.
nice, man. Just, whatever.
That's exactly it. It's just keeping a positive mind and stuff. And so, speaking of keeping a positive mind, like how do you mentioned that it can be very stressful industry and kind of stressful job. How do you go about keeping a good positive outlook? And
The older I get, man, things have changed for me. I've got a family, and my things that were super important to me are no longer important at all to me. So I've just been able to put things into perspective for me. As long as it makes sense for my family and for me, in that sense, you know, I don't have as much stress. I luckily, for now anyway, I'm at a point in my career that I only have to play the gigs that I want to. I still have to work. I still got to make money. It's not like I'm got, not like that. But I've been fortunate enough and worked long enough to where I have places that I can play that I enjoy. And relationships where I know the manager's been there for 30 years, and stuff like that. And so those things kind of keep the stress off a little bit. And then also, again, man, uh, delegating that to my team, just like having my manager do, that's what we pay him for. He does the crap, you know, not really, but like the phone calls, the emails, the response of what's important, and kind of ciphering through stuff and figuring out what's real, what's not real, kind of stuff. It's really helped me.
Yeah, it's funny how important it is and how helpful it is to have someone who knows what they're doing, kind of just by your side, helping you out with
Yeah.
in terms of stuff like that. It's a big stress relief. Um, so you're talking about how you started doing Fowler's Garage and stuff for COVID. How were you kind of affected by COVID, you and your friends? Because you're obviously a musician, you require
Right.
gigs. So how was it
I
adapting to
was,
that?
I did well. I did just fine. I had Fowler's Garage. I was doing online guitar lessons a lot. And about 6 months before all this happened, just by, I don't know how it happened, but my wife and I ended up buying a small t-shirt manufacturing business. And we basically bought like a real vinyl cutter, not a Cricut, but like a real one, like t-shirt companies use.
Mhm.
And we bought pro software for a laptop, and we bought a heat press. And what we were going to do is just do custom shirts for me, like real fancy ones, and it was really just going to be for us, kind of like as a project for fun. um, Man, we ended up starting Fowler's Garage, and we sold a ton of t-shirts. And the crowd, the response from the fans, like fans, they would tip us, and they would buy t-shirts and old CDs. And uh, we didn't. And another thing is our expenses were very low. I mean, we had rent and a car payment, but man, like for me, a lot of I make money when I tour, but I spend money.
To
you know,
tour, yeah.
yeah. So it's like, well, hotel rooms, you didn't have to buy hotel rooms. You don't have to buy gas. Didn't have an agent or a manager or anything. It was just me and my garage. And so we were able to keep our expenses low. Man, eat casseroles ate a bunch of casseroles, and just floated through it. And actually, man, I love playing music. I don't ever want to stop playing music for people. I always want to tour and all that stuff. But man, being home for the summer with my kids was fantastic. It was amazing. We got up every day, and we would eat casseroles, and we would play Go Fish. And we had like a little swimming pool. A little blow up swimming pool, but they're kind of awesome now. And so, man, it was a party, man. I did good. Um, and also I play guitar, and I sing, so I can front a song by myself. The people I saw that were affected most by it, that some people really struggled. I saw a lot of drummers, a lot of bass players, like saxophone players, like guys that are part of the band, that an integral part of the band, but may not be the face of the band. And people don't always put that together. Both guys that play in my band did good. Um, but I know a lot of folks that really struggled, and a lot of my friends struggled really hard. So it was rough to see them go through that.
Yeah, and it's one of the, I guess, all about perspective, but it's a kind of some of the positive things are starting to open up now. You're starting to see more people out and about, so hopefully, people can start recouping what they've lost, because I know it really hits performers and stuff incredibly
Yeah,
hard.
totally. It hit performers, it hit bartenders and waiters and waitresses, cooks, any of the hospitality folks. And in a weird way, man, I feel like musicians are like hospitality.
They are.
Like just for me, I know some guys like before this could go and make a YouTube channel and never played for the public kind of stuff. That's not me, man. I've been playing in bars and clubs and restaurants and pawn shop parking lots and barbecue joints and for my whole life. And so you end up a lot of my friends are like bartenders, waiters, people that work in the hospitality industry somehow. And those people really got it bad.
Yeah, it's just all you can do is now is just look towards the future and
Yeah.
do
And
what you can.
and I have to say, I don't really talk about politics or anything like that because I don't think it's a good idea.
Opinions are bad for business.
Well, and to be honest, man, I'm no genius. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the real deal is. Like, okay.
And not bold enough to act like it either.
No, I don't ask my advice for that. I mean, I'm a very empathetic person. I think that, I think we should have healthcare, stuff like that. But I will say, during all this time and seeing everything go down, I'm really super glad I live in Florida. I feel really lucky to be in the place I'm at right now, because there are a lot of musicians I know that still haven't played their first gig back yet. And most of those people aren't in Florida. They're,
Right.
other states and stuff. So
Yeah,
thinking of stars,
it's all about the gradual rollout now. Yeah, but
Yeah.
we of course touched on how you've done YouTube and stuff, and how other musicians kind of just use YouTube as their platform rather than going to the clubs and stuff. How did you kind of do? How have you dealt rather with the changes and evolution of technology throughout your career? Because
It's
from
changed.
it's CD. Whoever would have thought that CDs and stuff could somehow become outdated, like streaming
Man,
and everything. It's
the vinyl market is cranking.
Mm.
And man, a lot of my fans still have CD players. I think there's going to be CDs just like there were cassettes for years. It's an ever evolving thing, and I've had to learn to deal with it, learn to try to grow with it. And you never know what's going to be the next thing, because seems like every 6 months there's a new thing. And they're like, wow, we're going to put all our music on thumb drives. Now where it's all going to be, you got to download it off this cloud. Now it's, whatever the formula may be. And so I don't know, man, I try and stay relevant with it. I try and stay aware of it, but man, it leaves me in the dust. Technology is not my best subject.
you got
Politics or technology.
you got to bring a high schooler on board or something to keep you up with the trends.
Man, I'm super lucky. My wife is way smarter than me, and she's really good with computers and stuff. So I'm lucky in that world. She finds me in the garage with my laptop cursing, all the time.
It's got to be on, honey. It's got to be on.
Right. It's not, I don't know, man. For me, I'm like, man, it looks like there would be a bigger sign saying this button. You know what I mean? I'll search for something like forever, and I'm like, oh, I can't see it. I don't know where to click. I just don't know where to click. And then she walks right up and is just like, right here, click. And I'm like, oh man, I spent like 15 minutes looking for that.
It's funny how useful that is. Being tech savvy. It seems everybody seems to have struggles with it at some point.
Oh man,
But the saint. So what was this the longest you with COVID when COVID did hit? Was that the longest you had gone without performing on
Yeah,
this live stage? No,
yeah, yeah.
it's
I will say in 2005, I went a year because I had a really bad wreck, and
mm,
and so I just couldn't pick up my arm basically for a long time. I had to go through therapy and stuff, and so that was almost a year, and I will say that was for me worse because I couldn't hardly play. Like at least through COVID, man, I still, and with Fowler's Garage, we would have a few guests. I'd have like Barry Oakley came over one day. Uh, Josh Nelms would come over. Chuck Riley, my bass player, and my
yep.
trio would come and play sometimes. So I'd still get to play music with somebody. And that's another one of the best parts of it. Like this human interaction thing. You're making this thing. You know.
Yeah, it's who by the Chuck Riley, by the way, did very well on the album. And then you had Justin Headley on there too that did drums, and that was yeah they did a very phenomenal job. And you've been on and off with Chuck rather's been on and off with you, and you've kind of had Justin around for a while. Is that right?
Well, Justin and I have been playing together for probably like 8 or 9 years, maybe. Chuck Riley and I have been playing together probably 20 years. Chuck was the bass player in my band when I did all the first tours, all the hard tours. I'm sleeping on the floor. We're getting one hotel room. Part of our pay is like a pizza. I mean stuff like that. And Chuck has been with me since the very first road gigs. And in 2000 and maybe like 2015, maybe Chuck had to leave the road because he had a little girl.
Mm.
His wife was pregnant, and you got to do what's right for your family. Chuck is a good friend of mine, and so we had Matt Walker play bass, and Matt played for a few years. While Chuck raised his daughter, to be a couple years old, 2, 3 years old. And meanwhile I was still playing music with Chuck every once in a while. Like he had a little Thursday night out in Zephyr Hills where he'd have guests like I'm doing out in Brandon, and so I would go be the guest. And so when Matt, we were changing bass players, we were just like, well, Chuck, I mean, if you feel like coming back, love to have you. And it's great to have Chuck there. It it's playing music with somebody for that long. It is really nice having a relationship like that.
And how you just met on the road as well, pretty much
Uh,
not on the
Chuck,
road, rather on the scene.
yeah, we met at a jam night. There used to be this guy. There was a club in St. Pete on Gandy Boulevard called Dave's Aqua Lounge. And man, this place was like, it looked like the what's that? What's the gay bar on Police Academy? The Blue
Oh,
Oyster,
yeah.
right? I mean, it had like pink painting and like neon lights, and it smelled like fish in there because it was like all these fishermen would get off from Trapman's Bait and Tackle, which was right next door, and they'd come in there. So it was like old pirate dudes, but then there would be also like indie rock dudes in there, and it was a wild scene, man. And there was a Wednesday night jam. There's a guy named Molten Mike who had the Wednesday night jam every Wednesday. And man, I was probably 18 or 19. And I used to love going to the Molten Mike jam. And my cousin would go down there, my uncle would go there. And man, the old bartender, man, you didn't need facial hair or nothing, man. You could be like 17, she'd give you a beer, man. It was killer. And so Molten Mike had this jam, and Chuck was at the jam. I think he was actually playing bass for Molten Mike for a minute. And that was just years ago. And we just played a couple tunes, and we were like, hey, all right, good to see you. And maybe 6 months later, we started playing music together.
It's funny, just where the long-term friends just randomly pop up along the way.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. You don't know who these people are going to be in the future to you.
yeah, it's crazy. Like most of my best friends now, it's like you hang out with people throughout your whole life, and you just kind of always assume they're gonna be tight. And then like my 5 closest friends now, I didn't even talk to until like before 3 years ago. So it's just life's just always funny, man. It's just always
That's how
moving.
it
You're always
is.
making different connections. It's but I wanted to go back again to your first album because Riverview Drive, 1999, I believe. Um, but that was a pretty impressive producer to have for your first album, Rick Derringer, and he also performed on the record as well, I
He
believe.
did. He did a part. He did a rhythm guitar part, and he did sang a little part. Um, I met Rick because in the early days of my career, I was trying to make friends with the dude that owned Skipper's Smokehouse, and he had a talent agency, like I said, and so my uncle would go up there and take video VCR tapes of us playing, and be like, "Hey, book these kids," and Tom was like, "Hey, if you guys can go up, there's a gig up in Ocala. It's in Bellevue, Florida. It's called Mr. Pub, and it's kind of like our sister club. It's kind of like the Redneck Skippers, You guys come up there and do it." And so we would go up on Sundays and play, and we would just play. It was like bikers, like real bikers, you know. And one time the lights went out, the electricity went out, and my cousin ended up playing like a 40-minute drum solo, man. Just just going and going and going and going until the lights came back on. And then we kept playing. We played extra long, And that night kind of won all these bikers and all these dudes out in Ocala, won them over. And so we became a favorite at this club. And eventually it was a lot of times it was outside unless it was going to rain. And so we would do Rick Derringer was coming to town, and he was going to headline a show, but they wanted him to do 2 sets. And he's a rock star. And they're like, well, why don't we get the kids to play in between his sets so he can go cool off, because it was a hot gig. And so that's what we did. And then he watched our set, and then when he played his set, he had me come out and play his encore with him. And that's when I was like 18. And so I was like, oh, cool, And anytime he was coming back around town, I'd get contact from him somehow, and he'd be like, hey, come out and play the encore if you want, So I would go out and play the encore with him, and that was around the time I graduated high school. I was playing every Friday night at a place on Fowler Avenue across from University Square Mall. It was called Casey's Cove, and I had a house gig there on Fridays. And so after I graduated, I was like, man, I'm going to make a CD so I can sell at my gig, and was talking to Rick about it, and Rick agreed, so he produced it.
That's pretty awesome. Just again, you're talking about you never know. Like anything can happen at any given time.
Yeah.
Did you kind of appreciate just how not unheard of, but just how kind of crazy it was that 1 second like he doesn't know who you are, and then another second Rick Derringer knows your name, and he's gonna help you make an album as well.
I give credit to the power of music. That's like I said earlier, when I was a kid, I wasn't athletic or anything, and it was just something that worked for me, and it called to me, and it's always treated me good. You just respect the music and try and do do good by it, and it just seems like, it's always looked out for me in that sense.
That's tremendous, and it's all about power, love, power, music, and just fantastic stuff.
Manifestation, man.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, what was your first? You said you mentioned earlier road trips were bad. What was your first road trip?
My first road trip, yeah, man. One of my first road trips was, you look for an anchor. I got to go after this, by the way. My wife
That,
keeps calling.
that's
Um,
fine.
uh, you look for anchors, and an anchor is a gig that pays you good money.
Hmm.
And then you find pickup gigs on your way there and back, right?
Okay.
And so it's hard getting a booking agent. All right. And so I struggled and begged, and finally I got this guy in Colorado to start booking me. And he took a chance on me, and we gave him no firepower. We gave him no ammunition. He just started booking us. And so he got us an anchor, and we're like, all right. And it was $1,000. So to us, we are like, and rooms and $1,000 guys, this is gonna be great. And so then we're like, hey, where's it at? And he's like, it's in Casper, Wyoming. And I'm like, dang, it's like 34 hours from Tampa. Maybe you could pick us up a pickup gig on the way there. And so he did. And it was in Dardanelle, Arkansas. So it was like 18 hours from my doorstep. So we drove from Tampa to Dardanelle, got out and played our gig. They gave us hotel rooms in Dardanelle, but we couldn't use them because we had to get back in the van and make it to our anchor the next day in Casper, Wyoming, which was another like 17 hours or something. Just unbelievable. Like a terrible choice on our part. And so we start driving, and we get lost, ran out of pot. Uh, I fell asleep. When I woke up, we were pulled over, being searched. Um, yeah, good thing we ran out of pot.
Exactly.
Because this was the days where it was not legal at all.
Socially acceptable remotely.
It was drugs. And so we struggled. We finally get there. And we found out that we're the first band at this place since it's changed themes. Because last week it was a strip club. And there's a lot of pink neon and poles and like old pervy dudes. And we're just like, what? Oh, man. We started playing. And it was what it was. And then we had to get up early the next day and go to another gig. And that was the intro to that. One time I played a gig, and we get all the way out to Texas. We set our gear up on stage. We didn't even ask. We just set our gear up, right? Because we were young, stupid. And so we go and set all our stuff up. And then the manager of the club comes on and goes, what are you guys doing? Who are you guys? And we're like, Damon Fowler. We're from Tampa. Our booking agent. We have this right here on our itinerary. And they're like, no, we never booked you guys. There's this all-female punk band that's playing tonight. Like, not you guys. And we're like, oh, man. And then I was like, well, do you think maybe you could just trade us some food and we could open? For them? Or just not even food? Could we just open for them? And they're like, no, break your shit down and go. Get out of here. Yeah. So I mean, again, and and then the next night we played, and the band that we were supposed to do a co-bill. This was in Houston, and the band we were supposed to do a co-bill with, the guy, and it was a door deal, right? So you just play for whatever you make at the door, and so, and the guy that booked the gig, that talked to the agent, the owner, was like, "Oh, I'll pair you with my best band out here. These guys draw like crazy. This will be a fan maker for you. And then when you come back," so we're like, "Okay, cool. It's better than last night." So we get in there, set up all our gear, and trying to find the drummer from the other band because they're going to go on last, and we want to see if they want to use our drums, or there's all this stuff, and so then by that time the band comes and they're like, "Hey guys, we'd like to go on first because we saw you guys' website and your MySpace videos, and you guys are great, man, and we're just like a bar band, and so we're like, are all the people still gonna come? Wait, what?" And so then they played, ran the two people in the bar out, and so then the owner comes up to me and goes, "Oh, you boys ain't got to play." And I'm like, "Okay." Oh no. And so then we pack it up, and then he gives me $20, and he's like, "Here, man, fill up your gas tank and get some burgers for the boys." And and I'm like, "I don't think $20 is gonna do that." Thank you. So, I mean, that's just how the road is, man. There's
Yeah.
a ton of weird, and there's been moments that have just been unbelievable.
Right. I always like to say, people talk about humble beginnings. ZZ Top's first concert is only one person in the crowd. I mean,
Yeah.
It's just all about the journey. Really grateful to you again, Damon, for coming on. Very appreciative. Is there if someone wants to book you or get in touch, what are the best ways? I can link your
Just go
website
to
and
my
Facebook.
website. Yeah, my
Okay.
website, DamonFowler.com.
All right, great. I'll link everything too in the bio, so everything's easy to find and stuff. So
please
right.
like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.
I'll be sure to plug that too. All right, I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. I'll see you soon.
Sounds great. Have a good one.
You too.